At my sister's wedding, she told everyone I was just the help. Then the groom's father picked up the payment file and read my name out loud. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story is about betrayal, family pressure, and the moment a quiet sister finally stopped protecting people who never protected her. If you love emotional stories with strong endings, stay with me, because this one only gets worse before it gets unforgettable. My name is Ava Bennett, and the first time someone asked me if I worked for the caterer at my sister's wedding, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because by that point, I kind of did. I was 25 years old, wearing a black dress my sister had picked for me because, in her words, it blends in better. Holding a clipboard, answering vendor calls, carrying emergency bobby pins in one hand and boxed candles in the other. And while I ran around trying to keep her perfect wedding from falling apart, my older sister Brooke was telling people I was better behind the scenes. That was the polite version. The private version was worse. Brooke had always known how to cut me without raising her voice. She didn't scream. She smiled. She didn't insult me directly. She just said things like, "Ava doesn't really like attention," or "Ava's more comfortable helping," or "She's not really wedding party material." And people believed her because I was quiet. What nobody in that ballroom knew was that I wasn't quiet because I had nothing to say. I was quiet because, for years, speaking up in my family had only made things harder. Brooke was the beautiful one. That's not bitterness. That's just the role she was given early, and the one everyone kept feeding. She was tall, blonde, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately start arranging the air around her. My mother loved that about her, loved dressing her up, praising her, building her into the daughter she could show off. I was the practical one, the daughter who stayed home when mom got sick, the daughter who handled paperwork, the daughter who remembered medication schedules, tax dates, passwords, and who liked what for dinner? The daughter who learned early that being useful was the closest thing I was ever going to get to being chosen. Our dad had been the only person who saw me before I had to become useful. He used to tell me, "You notice what everyone else misses. That's your strength." When I got into a graduate program in Chicago 2 years earlier, he cried harder than I did. 3 months later, he was gone. A stroke. Fast. Brutal. No warning. After he died, everything in our house changed shape. The grief sat differently on each of us. My mother became sharper, Brooke became needier, and I became whatever was required. Dad had left behind a life insurance policy and a small education trust he had started just for me, not because he loved Brooke less, but because Brooke had never needed help believing the world would open for her. Dad knew I did. That fund was supposed to pay for my graduate school. It was supposed to be my way out. Then, 6 months before the wedding, Mom called me crying from a hospital parking lot. She said there had been complications with her procedure. She said insurance was denying more than they had expected. She said she was embarrassed even asking, but she did not know what else to do. And I believed her. Of course I did. I signed the release form that let her access part of the trust. She held my face in both hands afterward and said that she would never forget this and that I had saved me. 3 weeks later, Brooke booked a venue neither of us could afford. A month after that, she upgraded the flowers, then the live string quartet, then the custom champagne wall. I noticed all of it, but every time the thought crossed my mind, I killed it, because the alternative was too ugly. The wedding was at an old restored estate out Lyde. White stone, huge windows, manicured gardens, the kind of place designed to make ordinary people feel underdressed. I arrived at 9 in the morning because Brooke had texted me at 6:12 a.m., telling me not to be late because vendors were already asking stupid questions. No morning, no thank you, just that. When I got there, the planner shoved a headset into my hand, here if I was the bride's assistant. Before I could answer, Brooke laughed and said, basically. Then she turned me and adjusted the sleeve of my black dress. She told me not to disappear because she needed me useful that day. Useful. There it was again. I spent the next 5 hours fixing everyone else's panic. The florist was missing 2 centerpieces. The cake stand was wrong. One bridesmaid had a zipper issue. The DJ needed a new extension cable. The groom's cousin had a nut allergy nobody had reported. And every single time someone asked Brooke a question, she pointed at me like I was part of the rental package. At one point, I walked into the bridal suite carrying iced coffees and heard Brooke talking to her friends. She said that Ava lives for this stuff and that she would hate being up there with them. One of the bridesmaids said I was sweet. Brooke snorted and said, yes, in a very support staff kind of way. They saw me before I could step back. Brooke did not even look embarrassed. She just smiled and held out her hand for the coffee. That should have been the moment I left. But the truth is, people like me do not leave in the middle of family disasters. We stay. We keep holding up ceilings that were never built for us. Around 2:30, I was in the side office with the planner sorting escort cards when she handed me a stack of invoices. She asked if I could confirm these were the final releases tied to the Bennett transfer. I frowned and asked, what Bennett transfer? She looked confused and said, the wire, the one that cleared the remaining balance yesterday. She turned the paper toward me. At the top, in clean black print, were the words, Bennett Education Trust, authorized disbursement. My stomach dropped so fast, I actually grabbed the edge of the table. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I saw my own signature. Not on a wedding invoice, on the old hospital release form. Same date, same amount. Reclassified, redirected. I could hear blood rushing in my ears. The planner kept talking, something about final accounting, but I wasn't hearing her anymore. I was staring at the line item breakdown under the trust release. Venue deposit, floral balance, catering installment, entertainment. My graduate fund had not helped with Brooke's wedding. It had paid for almost all of it. I don't remember leaving the office. I just remember finding my mother in a hallway near the powder room and holding the papers so tightly my fingers were shaking. Tell me this is not what I think it is. She took one look at the top page, then tried to pull me into an empty room. Ava, not here. I stepped back. No, right here. Her face changed. Not guilty, annoyed. Ava, listen to me. You said that money was for your surgery. It was complicated. No, I said, louder now. It was a lie. She lowered her voice instantly. Do you want to ruin your sister's wedding over paperwork? I laughed then. A horrible, cracked sound I did not recognize as mine. Paperwork? That was my future. Her eyes hardened in a way I had only seen a few times in my life. We were going to put it back. When? After the wedding, she snapped. After Ethan's family transferred the condo gift and things settled down. Brooke needed this day to go well. I stared at her, and in that moment, something inside me finally stopped begging to be loved. Because she did not even sound sorry. She sounded irritated that I had found out too early. I wish I could say I marched straight into the ballroom and exposed them. I didn't. I went outside. I sat on the stone steps behind the venue with my phone in my lap and tried not to throw up. I thought about my dad. About the night I got my acceptance email and he brought home grocery store cupcakes because that was all he could afford. About the way he said, You're going to build a life nobody can take from you. But they had taken it. Not strangers. My own family. I sat there until my phone buzzed. Brooke, where are you? Guests are arriving. Stop being dramatic and get back inside. I read that message 3 times. Then I stood up, wiped my face, and went back in. Not because I forgave them, because I was done crying before the truth had even had a witness. By 5 o'clock, the estate was full. Ethan, the groom, was standing near the front windows with his family. He was decent-looking, polished, one of those men who seemed permanently prepared for a holiday card photo. I'd never been close to him, but he had always treated me politely. His father, Richard Hale, was different. Quiet, expensive, the kind of man who read every contract before signing anything. He ran some private investment firm, and everyone in my family acted like he was royalty. I was carrying a tray of place cards toward the reception hall when I heard Brooke laughing with 2 of Ethan's aunts. One of them pointed at me and asked if I was with the venue. Brooke did not even hesitate. She said no, she was my sister, but honestly, she was happier helping than being in the spotlight. Then she looked straight at me and added, as usual. Something cold settled inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just clarity. The ceremony started 30 minutes late because Richard wanted to review a gift agreement before the family signed over the condo they were giving Ethan and Brooke as a wedding present. Apparently, because of how the property was being transferred, the lawyers needed all major wedding expenses properly disclosed. I only knew that because the planner was panicking near the side entrance, and when people panic around me, they tell me things they do not mean to. 5 minutes later, I was standing near the back wall of the bridal prep room when voices rose in the hall outside. Brooke stepped out in her gown, already angry, asking what Richard meant when he said they needed to wait. Richard stood there with a thin payment folder in his hand and calmly said there was a discrepancy, a significant one. Mom rushed over and insisted it was nothing. Richard glanced at the top sheet and said that if it was nothing, then they could explain why the primary funding source for this wedding was listed as the Bennett Education Trust. My mother went white. Brooke did not. She went red. And then, unbelievably, she looked at me like it was somehow my fault. She demanded to know what I had said. I laughed once, but this time it sounded steadier. I told her I had not needed to say anything. My name was already on the bill. The room went silent. Ethan looked from Brooke to me to the file in his father's hand and asked what I was talking about. Brooke crossed her arms and called it a temporary family loan. I told him no, it was my graduate school fund, and I had signed that release because Mom had told me she needed emergency surgery money. Mom stepped forward and begged me to stop, but I was done with pleas. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and opened the scanned documents I had emailed myself 10 minutes earlier from the planner's office. Original hospital release request, trust authorization, wedding payment ledger. Same amount, same date range, different story. I handed the phone to Richard first, then Ethan. Ethan stared at the screen so long, I thought he might not understand it. Then he looked at Brooke and asked if she had taken her sister's school fund to pay for this. Brooke's eyes filled instantly, but I knew her too well to mistake tears for truth. She said it was not like that. I asked her then what it was like. She turned to me with sudden venom and accused me of always doing this, always making everything about myself, and for once not being able to let something good happen because my life had not turned out how I wanted. That was the moment the room changed. Because until then, some people might have believed this was a misunderstanding. But cruelty has a way of clarifying everything. Ethan took a step back from her. Richard closed the folder. One of the bridesmaids quietly sat down, and my mother, who had spent my whole life asking me to be the bigger person, said the words I think finally killed whatever daughterly loyalty I had left. She told me that if I loved my sister, I would handle this privately. I looked at her for a long moment, and then said very calmly that if she had loved me, there would have been something left to handle privately. No one spoke after that. Just silence. Heavy, public, humiliating silence. Finally, Ethan exhaled and loosened his tie. "I can't do this," he said. Brooke stared at him. "What?" "I can't marry someone who lies to her own sister like this, and I definitely can't marry into a family that thinks theft is just bad timing." Brooke's face crumpled. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. It's just money." I think that line shocked even her, because once it was out, there was no pulling it back. Just money? My future. My father's last gift to me. My way out. Just money. Richard turned to his son. "Take a walk." Then he looked at me. "Miss Bennet," he said, in a voice so measured it almost made me break. "I think you need representation." For a second, I couldn't speak, not because of the legal part, because it was the first time all day anyone in that family had addressed me like I was a real person. The ceremony never happened. Guests were told there had been a family emergency, which, for once, was true. The makeup artist left, the violinist packed up, someone started taking down white chairs from the garden. And I stood in the middle of all that collapsing perfection, feeling emptier than I expected. Not triumphant. Not yet. Just clear. Brooke locked herself in the bridal suite for nearly an hour. My mother cried in 3 separate rooms, mostly because people had seen. And I sat in the venue office with Richard's attorney, forwarding documents, printing trust records, and learning more in 40 minutes than I had in the 6 months since I signed that release. The insurance company had covered my mother's procedure, almost all of it. The rest had already been paid from a joint account. The trust money had never been needed for medical bills, not even for 1 day. By the time the sun went down, I had copies of everything. By midnight, I was back in my apartment, sitting on the floor in my dress, shoes off, reading my graduate school acceptance letter from 2 years ago. I had never deleted it. Maybe some part of me had always known I'd need proof that I was once headed somewhere. The next few weeks were ugly. My mother called me heartless. Brooke texted that I had humiliated her. An aunt told me family should come before money. I blocked all of them, because it was never about the money. It was about what they believed they could take from me and still call love. Richard connected me with a trust attorney. I recovered what was left of the fund, and Brooke was forced into a legal repayment plan for the portion already spent beyond recovery. The venue lost its non-refundable deposits. The florist kept part of the payment. The champagne wall, ironically, had been custom built and could not be returned. Good. Let her keep something useless and expensive. 3 months later, I reapplied to my program. I didn't write about betrayal in my admissions statement. I wrote about interruption, about grief, about delayed beginnings, about how some people spend years confusing survival with loyalty. When the acceptance came through again, I cried harder than I had at the wedding. This time, nobody took the moment from me. I moved to Chicago in late August. Tiny studio apartment, loud radiator, bad coffee shop downstairs. Beautiful freedom. On the first night there, I unpacked the framed photo I'd carried across 2 states. Me and Dad at my college graduation, both of us squinting into the sun. I set it on the windowsill and sat on the floor beside it. Then I said, out loud, I made it back. I haven't spoken to Brooke in over a year. My mother sends the occasional message on holidays, always written like forgiveness is something I owe the people who emptied me. I don't answer. Maybe that sounds cold, but there is a difference between revenge and refusal. I didn't ruin my sister's wedding. I just stopped holding it up with my future. And if you've spent your whole life being the quiet one, the helpful one, the easy one, let me tell you something I wish I had learned sooner. The day you stop protecting people who use your silence is the day your real life begins.